Anderson twice this year has been the bridesmaid, but tonight he gets to march down the aisle first and pick up his first Hooters Cup victory. So Dick Anderson, the king of the Florida short tracks with over 800 feature wins in his illustrious career, picks up his first Hooters Cup Series victory tonight. And Buddy Parrott, he did it convincing style.
We've had so many good strong runs and have something bad happen to us. This has been a long time overdue. I'm really happy about it, and I'd like to thank all the people that stood behind us for this long. But we've had an excellent team, excellent car builder, excellent owner, excellent engine builder, and it just hasn't come together for us. And I kept telling them the last half of the year was going to be ours, and I told them Pensacola was going to turn it around. Sure enough, we had a good run at Pensacola, a good run here, and I think we're going to have a good second half of the season.
NASCAR's short track scene isn't just the ground floor for future talents, but also an incredible ecosystem all its own, producing entertaining Saturday night action. Anything from four-banger Hornets all the way up to super aerodynamically slick, super late model stock cars. Short tracks from north to south and coast to coast are home to some of the closest battles and races that tracks that even the Cup Series regular tracks like Martinsville and Bristol can only hope to match. Weekenders slugging it out for funsies, mixing it up with those hoping to use it as a way to bridge the gap to get to an ARCA or Truck Series ride. And then there's the third types of drivers. Those who are masters of their short track craft, their unending dedication to building bullring battleships and steering them to victory lane week in and week out can sometimes even make Cup Series top-tier teams look like kids' play by comparison. Crowning examples like Wisconsin's White Knight, Dick Trickle, with over 1,200 feature race wins at places like Slinger. The Southeast's Richie Evans, the single most winningest modified driver in history, making racetracks like Stafford and Thompson his places to plant his championship flags. But there is one more short track king that is often neglected to be mentioned. If the White Knight is the king of the North, and Richie Evans the king of the Southeast, Dickie Anderson is no doubt the king of the South, or those who know his legacy, the undoubted king of Florida short tracks. With 1,200 estimated feature race wins of his own, most of which in super late models, he'd also be the single winningest stock car driver in the entire country in 1980, with no less than 51 feature wins out of the 64 races he'd enter. And if you can believe it, that's only the tip of the iceberg. It's the only driver to ever truly challenge Dick Trickle. This is the story of Dick Tricky Dickie Anderson. Dickie Anderson was born on November 19th, 1948 in Wildwood, Florida, just north of Lakeland. Just like many legends, his racing start came in his early teens, racing quarter midgets at the age of 12. He'd then move on to stock cars proper by the age of 16, driving a 1949 Ford Coupe. Ironically, his initial success was not in his home state, but rather in the Northeast, the Southeast, and the Midwest. He'd start slinging dirt in the 70s, earning Rookie of the Year at Nazareth in Pennsylvania in 1974. Longing for home, Dickie Anderson as number 92 would make their way back toward home soil and hit it off with a win at Palm Beach Fairgrounds Speedway in West Palm. He would then up that with more wins at New Smyrna, Daytona Beach, Showtime Speedway, and yet again at Palm Beach. It would also be at Palm Beach Fairgrounds where he would win multiple track championships throughout the 1980s. Even in the 1970s, however, he'd already start to have his run-ins with stock car legends. In 1978, he'd have a run-in with none other than Dale Earnhardt at Metrolina. With only a handful of laps to go in the race, Dale had punctured the radiator. Being the take-no-prisoners type that he was, he knew that the only way to secure the prize money was to improvise a way to take his competitors out. His first attempts were to block the pole sitter that day, Haywood Piler. After Haywood would pass him, he'd swing for him and nudge him, but it wouldn't be enough to get him bent out of shape, and thus kept on leading. Dickie, however, was not far behind them and running up fast. Dale wasn't about to make the same mistake twice. Sure enough, Dale would swing for the fences, quite literally. He'd hit him square in the quarter panel, lifting up right out of the guardrail and right through it, into a ditch on the other side. Dickie and his car were so far deep that all could be seen was the back bumper. This would bring out a red flag and rain would cut the event short. Now, Metrolina might have been one of Dale's local hometown tracks, but the crowd that day was fixing a riot over this. They jumped out of the stands to chase him down, and right ahead of him was Dickie himself, almost looking as though he was leading the damn charge. fixing to punch him in the face once, maybe twice, for good measure. He'd almost get his chance too, but not before Dale managed to deer hop onto the hood of a '73 Ford truck, then onto its roof, and then over the barbed wire fence. That must have been a sight to behold. Deciding to further expand his short-track racing dominance, good old Tricky Dick would run in the All-Pro Super Series, famously driving slick speed shovels like these. In 1983, competition had proved to be rather tough, and would even give him a run for his money. Drivers like Neil Bonnet, Steve Grissom, and Rusty Wallace proved to be the drivers he'd have to slug it out against. Despite this, and despite his being his first ever All-Pro Series stint, he'd finish 5th in points. Further success would be gained by sweeping Florida's mainstay stock car events like the Marion Edwards 200, the Florida Governor's Cup, and several wins in the pro stock feature races at Volusia County Speedway, and he'd become the winningest driver at the World Series of Asphalt at New Smyrna in 1994. That same year, he'd become the Florida Pro Series champ and was recognized as the winningest driver in the series to date. During his return to Florida, he'd participate in the Slim Jim Series, duking it out against the likes of Mario Gosselin. He'd also have a run in the Hooters Pro Cup Series, where he'd become the winningest driver. By 2001, he'd win the Florida Pro Series Championship, the Fast Car Late Model Series Championship, and the Fast Car Triple Crown to round out the successful season effort, winning 26 out of the 36 events and winning Driver of the Year. After his victories, Dickie decided to cool down for a little while, selling his old late models instead of turning laps on them. These so-called Dickie cars proved to be a successful venture for him and those who raced in them. For 2006, he'd briefly returned to racing by entering races at Columbia Speedway and Orlando. He'd win both races handily. Shame they were only one-off appearances, but I guess he didn't want to show off the competition. Going into late 2000s, Dickie would instead focus on helping new talent enter the sport, setup advice, building race cars for him, and generally being a helping hand whenever and however he could. One of his prodigies was Jeff Choquette, Florida native, who would go on to nab the 2007 Governor's Cup at New Smyrna and become that year's ASA champ. He'd also help other folks out like David Wilson, Matt Bowers, Todd Allen, and 2007 New Smyrna Pro Truck champ Jessica Murphy. So, what's old Tricky Dick up to nowadays? Well, he may no longer be racing, but don't count him out. He thought about making a late model return sometime around the 2010s, and he may still make a brief one-off return for a race or two like he did in the past. He's still involved in the sport in many other ways, continuing to build race cars out of his shop and mentoring. His legacy continues via his son, Wayne Anderson, who was already a Rookie of the Year in 1987 just after he left high school. While so far as of writing this, he's only got one track championship and still a ways from meeting his old man's win records, I think it's only a matter of time before he nabs a couple more for the trophy room. The Anderson legacy continues.
I'm here with Wayne Anderson, the winner of tonight's feature for the Super Late Model 100. Wayne, it looked like you were just having a time out front all night out there. Tell us about your race.
Well, I'll tell you, my car was good. It's been good for the last year here. And so I knew that as long as I saved my tires, the 98 would be coming. And when he got there, I didn't feel like he could race with me. But then when we had all that oil on the racetrack, I knew the leader going into that was going to be hard because it didn't seem like they got all the oil up. But sure enough, we went down in the corner, and I got loose and slid up. 98 went by me, but then he went down the next corner and got in the same stuff, and I went back by him. So, and nonetheless, it was a great race, and I was, tickled that the fans stuck it out and that the people stuck it out because it looked like it was going to rain all day. So, nonetheless, we won. I'm happy enough. I can't thank my sponsors, James Carter, attorney down in Braden, and Do Right Plastering out of Gainesville. Just a terrific night for us.
And certainly a long, hard fought battle for you. It was a long race out there with several cautions. Was it going through your mind at all through those restarts that you got to kind of stay on top of the wheel?
Well, absolutely going to have to stay on top of the wheel, but we lost our exhaust pipes and they slid out that far, and it really had me nervous. I wanted to make sure they didn't get out no farther and have to come in the pits, but they stayed right where they were. Everything worked out good for us tonight, so thank you guys for coming out and televising this thing.
Well, definitely. That's Wayne Anderson, the winner of tonight's Super Late Model 100 at Citrus County Speedway. For Florida Sports Talk Radio, I'm Tori Petrie.